Somebody shut the music off. Stop it, Dab. Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Coast-to-Coast EVs, your fortnightly fast charge on electric vehicles and infrastructure, and actually the final one of 2024, because we will be on New Year's Day, I guess, the next time this comes around, or New Year's Eve, whatever it's going to be. So, welcome. Thanks for joining us for this last one of the year, and as a reminder, we have next day audio typically on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all of the usual places. And once I get my backside in gear and arrange some shows for next year, we do have a bunch of guests. I just have to figure out the right dates. And you can go to plugandplayev.com/coast-to-coast-evs-show, and that will tell you who's coming up. So as always, let us know in the comments where you are, maybe what you're doing, if you have any plans for the holidays, big road trips in your EV to get to friends, family, or any other adventures. We do have some candidates already. And we will introduce first, obviously, Mr. Eric Way of the News Coolum channel and Mr. Walter Schultze of the Network Architect channel. Those big plans for tomorrow, if his background doesn't give it away. And we will jump into the news, which Walter has helped me out here with several of the Detroit companies, General Motors, Ford, Blue Oval. These are striking deals with battery makers, charging vendors, all kinds of fun and games there. Walter, do you want to take it away?
Certainly, yeah. I did a road trip on business to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and after which I went on a EV car camping trip into West Virginia, and I passed by two of the factories that Ford was building, and at the time it was full steam ahead. They had construction equipment out. They were in the process of putting roofs on. The foundations were already in, and walls were going up, and everyone in the area was talking about it. Everyone knew what it was. It was the Blue Oval battery factories. And then they just pumped the brakes. Later nerds, that was it. Poof, they just shut it down. And something about finances, or I don't know if their accountants finally showed them a number of what it was actually costing, and they're like, whoa, or what exactly happened, but they stopped. And for a construction project like that to stop in its in the phase that it was, I mean, normally you would stop it before it got that far along, but they had walls up, and the grading was complete, and they were building roads and interchanges onto the interstate. It was a very large facility, and I don't know if you all remember, there was YouTubers getting brought to the location and giving site tours and expectation of when it was going to be open. And then it all just got shuttered, and Ford EV fans were really hit hard with the news that it wasn't occurring, and new Ford EVs were kind of put on hold as well, and we were just going to be left with the Ford F-150 Lightning, E-Transit, and the Mach-E. But this is shifting gears now, because now they've received money from the Department of Energy in order to proceed with those battery plants, and those battery plants are going to produce batteries, and those batteries have to go somewhere, so they're going to be going into EVs, and I don't think they're going to just go into F-150 Lightning, E-Transits, and Mach-E's. I'm thinking this is indication that Ford is now moving the accelerator forward again with their plans to expand their EV lineup.
We've hit on GM's roster and the growing number of models that they have to sell and spike sales this year. What are you expecting, just to riff off it a little bit, from Ford next year? What's kind of catching your eye if they are going to have this huge battery supply? What models are going to be the big sellers potentially?
Well, the crowd pleaser, and it was quietly getting announced, and then it kind of went away, was the Fiesta. A Ford Fiesta EV, I think, would be neck and neck with a Bolt V2 or a Boltium, whatever we want to call it, because that Bolt, once it comes out, is going to be sold so fast. I mean, everyone's talking about the Tesla model, what are they calling it? The Model Q or whatever they're calling it, the inexpensive 20,000. I mean, Bolt's coming for you, Tesla. And GM has proven that they've got the ability to churn out numbers, and Ford can't just be a spectator in this game. They need to put something forward. So if I had to guess, a Fiesta might be coming out of that skunk work crew in San Jose. And possibly, there's the T3 truck also, but I don't think that'll be coming soon. But first, we got to get the battery plants up and running and completed. And I think they've got their work cut out for them, because nothing's worse than shuttering a construction site and then rebooting it. It definitely takes some time and capital.
Eric, you are driving the king of the affordable EVs before it was briefly sunset. What do you think this means for Ford? Do you want to see those affordable models out the door first, or the trucks?
I only want to see $100,000 models moving forward. That's it.
Hummer EVs, Ford Hummer EV.
Yes. Yes. So if I heard Walter correctly, you're saying that GM could start turning the screws or turning the bolts, maybe. But yeah, actually, it's kind of an interesting the Festiva. Because I've long believed that the Bolt EV was secretly the spiritual successor to the Chevy Sprint, which not a whole lot of people even knew about. But it was basically a very low cost hatchback that got 50 plus miles to the gallon, cost like $9,000 back in the early 1990s, late 1980s. So it was a very cheap, very affordable economy car, right? And the Bolt EV is kind of the spiritual successor to that. So if Ford can do something similar with the Festiva reboot, I think that would, or Fiesta, which either way, I know they've used both names, but they're both smaller cars. But I think anything that they could do where they could get a sub $25,000 model in, even if it is only about 250 miles of range and a small battery, high efficiency package, I think that would go a very long way for Ford. So yeah, I would love to see it. So
especially if we're talking about the 7500 going away, we need more lower cost models in order to be attracting more mainstream consumers. And it seems like that the absence of the 7500 will kind of negate the $50,000 kind of base entry price for EVs, and instead force car companies to start producing the less expensive ones.
Yeah. So
we have cheaper batteries. Battery prices in general are coming down every month, it seems now, not just year. But if you're starting to produce them yourself and have these deals in place, then batteries may not be the big cost point or as much of a pain point as they were, in the past. And that's kind of where the incentives were there to bridge the gap, right? Maybe we've got far enough to kind of, if not there, but very close to making that cheap enough already.
No, did we also hear, maybe I'm misremembering this, but did we also hear from Ford? I thought they said that their first EV that would come with the native NACS J3400 socket hadn't been announced yet. So to your point, Walter, I think there may be something in the works that hasn't been announced yet. So we're waiting on that.
And this might have all circulated around the acceptance of the DOE loan. And that's maybe why they pumped the brakes. It didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. Why are they letting GM just run away with this thing? Do they believe EVs are not going to actually occur, or what? But they just kind of like paused, and they started coming up with these strange, nonsensical reasons for the pause. And now the DOE loan is going through, and now it's like, all right, we're ready to go.
Yeah. There's also the issue with China too, because I know Ford was working pretty closely with some Chinese battery manufacturers as well, and there's been a lot of domestic pushback and the potential for tariffs and the qualifications for EV credits that have really kind of put the kibosh on any sort of Chinese battery factories or even Chinese affiliated battery factories in North America. So.
Okay, I think we will cover our other news story, but we'll wrap it up into the main section because it does hit charging vendors and General Motors as well, so that'll be a nice bridge. But seeing as we're here and saying hello to everybody, Let's go around the houses. Starting in Ann Arbor, Michigan, beautiful part of the world, probably under some snow right now, I would imagine, but or getting it very soon. But Yoldi Traveler, greetings from there. John Baker, over the ocean in my homeland. Hi from the UK. I hope you are awake, or at least able to stay awake for a little bit here to tell us maybe some of your charging vendor stories from the UK. Certainly a bit further ahead than we are.
And I was watching EV, man. Does it ever snow in the UK?
It does. It is in Yorkshire. Probably gets some up on the passes, maybe Snake Pass, those areas, but it's usually an inch and then it stops all the trains.
Oh, okay.
It's not Winter Wonderland typically. Let's see. Bill B, Tampa, Florida, driving Audi Q8 e-tron. Good evening. Andy Getch down in Florida. Hello, thanks for joining us. We do have another fellow crew member heading over to Apex. Tyler at the Average EV will be there with Walter from the Network Architect channel. I know from my neck of the woods, Corbin, the Ionic guy, is heading down. I think he's halfway there, maybe. Bunch of people. Really good thing tomorrow. You've got to watch Walter's content, and then everybody else's. You're going to see a bunch of interesting things coming, I think. And just to point out, Walter's eye has been turned. No longer the love of his life, PFJ. We are moving on. You'll have to up the scope and maybe get some blueberry pies or something interesting into their mix to win Walter back. Crazy Postman has got the popcorn out of the microwave. Hope you're settling in to join us for a little while here. The Arkansas e-Traveler, hello from Bentonville, Arkansas, 24 Chevy Blazer EV. Maybe we can get onto your part of the world with the Walmart DC fast charging build out, or lack thereof, in a little bit here. Paul over in Bakersfield, California in 2020 Bolt, welcome. Stephen St. Peter Jr. Greenwave Electric Vehicles, our favorite used EV seller in the Northeast, certainly, and across the country for most people. Lots of sales, busy as well, and we've got some videos in the works, so stay tuned for them. Leonard, Apex is certainly way too far from the center of the country there, but thank you for joining us virtually to talk about it nonetheless. Scott Owens over in Atlanta, BMW iX, headed on a road trip for the holidays. Atlanta to Key West, all parts in between, both directions. Feels much better about the infrastructure than he did 11 months ago. I think we all do, and that is definitely kind of the topic of, I should point out, we did a episode with Grid Connections, Chase over at Grid Connections podcast, on a lot of the topics, some of the stuff we've talked about tonight, but also wider, talking about 2024 trends, improvements, things we're looking at in 2025. So that's definitely worth a look and a listen after this. And I'll put the links down in the description of the video replay. But thank you, Scott, for joining us. Platform Fanatic 23 Ionic 5 in the Bay Area of California, hoping to see an IONNA station on the West Coast sometime by 2040. Yeah, they for all the EVs and everything out there, we do tend to get a little bit on the slow side. But you do have Eric's favorite, Electric Era, and sure there'll be some interesting stuff popping up in 2025. Jay Donaldson, please mahalo. I will let that comment stand. Mike Mahan down in SoCal. Hi guys, late. Won't be able to stay for long. Thank you for joining us nonetheless. We appreciate you stopping by. Yoldi Traveler, only light slow so far, but I hope it stays that way for you unless you are a winter activities person. And Mark Berenger, let's go in the right order here. Hello from Newcastle, Ontario, Canada, a Kia EV6. And comment on low-cost EVs need to happen, but also requires charging options for multi-dwelling charging. Yeah, that's a big piece. Obviously, we've talked about that in the past with Pando Electric, It's Electric, a bunch of the players we may get onto a little bit later. But yeah, a big piece of the charging puzzle for sure. And then we have Crazy Postman put his leave slip for Apex. Manager looked at him funny and said no. Yeah, apparently charging stations aren't quite as appealing to the regular public as they are to strange folks like us. And Anthony over in Seattle, thank you for joining us. Jim Farley is on record saying that mass market EV profitability is opposite of ICE vehicles. That is, ground up designed 35 to 40K EVs are profit generators, not 60K EVs. Pricey ICE EVs, pure profit. Yeah, it's kind of going against the previous wisdom, right? Of Tesla's approach had to be build the expensive version first and then work your way down. Same with Rivian, same with Lucid. Guess we can dwell on that for a second. And what do you think as we kind of move into this 2025 market? We should see from some of these players who maybe haven't done a GM, built out that kind of roster that is covering a lot of different price points. Would you focus on the affordable end that we've talked about, trying to get some Halo cars out and trying to work that technology down? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it honestly has to be affordability. And really the reason I say that is we've seen a contraction in the overall market with sales dropping. Oh, now EV sales are growing, and they're growing just overall, and they're growing as a percentage of the market. But we also have to realize that the market itself is contracting, and I think it has to do with the price of cars, right? And this is like, I hear it over and over and over again, and it is not just about electric vehicles. People are willing to spend a little bit more on electric vehicles, and it's mostly because the main buyers so far for electric vehicles have been more affluent. And so if you're going to spend $60,000, $70,000 on a car, you're more likely to buy an EV than you are not an EV. But the reason the market is shrinking is because fewer and fewer people can actually even afford a car. So yeah, we see these cars with really great lease deals, right? We're seeing like Nissan Leafs, but then we're also seeing like the Honda Prologue, right, that has a great lease deal, or the Blazer EV that has a great lease deal where it's cheap to get into them, and they're just flying off the lots. So, there needs to be, these lower cost options. And I think that needs to be most of these automakers' focus moving forward, is making an affordable car that is good enough to replace an ICE car for the average person. So.
Yeah, and this top-down kind of start with the expensive EV has played out a lot already. There are a lot of contenders in there with your Lucids, your Rivians, even to some extent still the Model S and Model X, filling those gaps. So you don't, even in some of those new models, the Cadillacs, the GMC Hummers, even the Denali EV, right? Some of these are expensive trucks, high-end EVs, just by virtue of their price point and their luxury kind of category. So it's hard to really say that is a starved market anymore. That's probably one of the better served areas that we can talk about.
But I do think we have, as a community, as an EV community, have to have an honest discussion of what expensive and affordable actually mean, because we throw those terms around. But I can say for me, for sure, like I was the first member of my family to ever spend more than $24,000 on a car. So like that's the ceiling. So like when you're talking about working class families, working class people, if you're breaking much past $20,000 for a car, you're eliminating half the potential market just right there. So our idea of what affordable actually is, I think, needs to be, whatever you think affordable is, probably cut 30% off of it, and then you're approaching reality. So
that's what we've been talking about and trying to get to for years here. So I won't shy away from it. I'd love that to be the case and that to be the next focus, because for too long it's been Halo cars, concept cars, top of the line that they're going to sell a couple of hundred. Fewer Celestiques, more Bolt EVs, I think.
Well, I'll take a Celestique if someone's handing one out, for sure. But one thing with the shakeup at Stellantis that they have going for them, because the European market tends to be more niche, lower cost production, Fiat being one of them, they definitely have the ability to pull from the European makers into North America a whole contingent of low-cost EVs. And it wasn't done under Carlos Tavera, but now that he's gone, who knows who's going to come in and say, this EV thing, we need to catch up quick. Before we know it, we've got cargo ships full of European EVs showing up into the United States for low-cost options being sold through Stellantis dealers or something. I'm not quite sure, but there's definitely the option for that because they, in their family of brands, they have multiple different models that are able to come in at the mid 20s in the North American market.
We didn't even touch on the Japanese brands all that much other than the Prologue, which is obviously, a GM extension, but we've talked about Honda and Nissan potentially partnering up here. Toyota, not even really in the conversation at the moment, other than to talk about their rideshare drivers and taxi drivers love the BZ4X for some reason. But that's a giant kind of affordable set of automakers waiting to kind of enter at some point when they really start to make moves. That will be an affordable end of the market.
Yeah, on Transport Evolved News, they were mentioning about the Honda lease deal, and I was actually en route. I picked up my son, and I was coming home, and I'm like, well, I'm just going to swing by the Honda dealership. I asked my wife, she said, yeah, needed to run it by her because anything that we do is a co-decision. At least I tell myself that. But when they ran the numbers, the base model was 49 sticker, and that lease deal ended up being about $750 a month with $2,000 down. And starting at 50 and going up, that's not an inexpensive car. And I could see why they're trying to reduce it and get it off the lot. I mean, not many people are hunting, base price $50,000 cars in order to put in their garage. That's a higher echelon vehicle. So I'm not quite sure why they're thinking that's a good price, and definitely see why they have wiggle room on that particular model in order to knock almost $10,000 off the price is what they were suggesting.
So, and maybe I would like to just give a shout out when you started talking the lease pricing, because I'm not going to remember all of these numbers off the top of my head. But Liv and Patrick at the Mach-E blog did a great breakdown. They recently leased a Chevy Equinox EV, and they went through a price breakdown of all of the vehicles that they looked at in terms of the actual true cost of the lease. So if that is something that you're interested in, I recommend going over there and checking out that video they did, because they have a lot of information about the cost of these leases. Yeah,
I think I remember seeing that videos.
Yeah.
I'm just making notes on the ones I have to add down in the description, because probably by the end of this we will have a ton to share. So plenty of weekend and holiday viewing for you all. On the subject of which, let's move to our main topic, the year in review for charging vendors. We do obsess over EV charging infrastructure here, especially on the fast charging side, and that's what we're going to do for the rest of the show, pretty much. So no exception for the last show of the year. But this was a good topic, I think, in germinated from Eric kind of discussing some of the providers that he's seeing coming up, and obviously Walter's tracking a bunch here and passing over some of those projects to other folks. I'm trying to start up alongside stuff like Nevi, following who's in there and which players might make a difference next year. So we thought we'd kind of take stock, take a breath, and look back at 2024 to see some of the ones that have been overperforming, underperforming, just too quiet for our own comfort. And we'd like to hear from you as well. It's some of this is a very regional thing. One of the things that I uncovered as I looked at the Francis Energy side was that 75% of their existing chargers, they're quite a large network, but they're in Oklahoma, and literally just Oklahoma. So all of these are kind of talk about expanding outside has not. It's been a little bit, they started to make moves, but the big piece of that will be the Nevi funding. They haven't made that big explosion outside of Oklahoma until they've got that a lot of those funds coming through. So we want to know about your local area, who you've been using, who you've been kind of excited about, and we'll get on to some of those. But Eric, this was a brainchild that came from you, so I'd love to start with you. And obviously we know some of your favorites and the ones you're watching, but what kind of jumps out at you from the last 12 months?
Well, I mean, I'm probably going to be suffering from some recency bias just because I've been traveling more in the last month or so than I have probably 10 months before that. But Electric Era is the standout for me right now in this year. And I didn't even believe it, right? I had to go back and confirm this. Their first station, at least in Western United States, was opened in June. So in less than 6 months, they've opened nearly a dozen charging stations, most of them with 4 to 6 to 8 charging stalls, split power, 200 kilowatt charging. Their uptime it's listed on their website. It's one of their points of pride. They have a ridiculously good uptime. I've had, out of 4 visits, I had 1 failure where the credit card reader didn't work, and I had to move to a different charger. I visited again a few weeks later, and the credit card reader worked. So they fixed the problem, which is always a pain point for a lot of these networks, is not getting around to fixing issues, right? So they've been on top of it. They've been getting issues fixed, and their turnaround time for getting sites open has been ridiculously fast. So they've kind of stood out to me as being one of the up and coming charging providers to really look at or to watch. There have been a couple of them that just completely negative, right? Is like the EV gateway I mentioned, where right now I know of at least a few different sites where they're completely stranded assets. Just left the chargers in the ground. Either they're not powered up anymore, or they were never powered up to begin with. Just some cheap BTC power 50 kilowatt units and just left them there, right? Basically, it's like a money grab, install the units and get out of town. And it's really disappointing to see that. And I don't know if someone can come in and put some back-end software in that would allow them to activate like an EV Connect or something like that. So that was a bit of a letdown. And then a couple that I was hoping to see more from, I'm not necessarily upset with, right? But EV Range is one that they were formerly of Recargo, right? They took a team from them, and they have put in stations. I still haven't gotten up to the one that they installed on Highway 395 in a really sort of remote area, supporting that network. And they've expanded the one they had in Kettleman City. So I've seen stories posted on PlugShare of people waiting in line at Kettleman City, where, for those of you who don't know, there's almost 100 supercharger stalls there, plus a 10-stall Electrify America station, and there are multiple car-long lines for all of those chargers. And you turn the corner and go to EV Range, and you have 250 kilowatt chargers open and available. Well, they've expanded that now to 4. So they have been improving their sites, and they've been growing, just not as fast as I would like. And then the other one is ChargeNet, where they had a real strong pause on any sort of build out. But they've recently started to open up some of their sites now. So they've had a few new sites going. I think one was in Roanoke Park and another in Santa Rosa. And then they have a few apparently planned for some Jack in the Box locations. So, I mean, if you're a fan of fast food like Taco Bell and Jack in the Box, you can charge up while you're charging up your car. So, but I was really hoping to see them. When I talked to them, they had plans for hundreds of sites that should have been opened by this point. And they've had some slowdowns, but they're still kicking, which to me is, that's enough. And then I'm not quite ready to call BP Pulse to the floor to this. So I'm just going to note it here as a concern. Is I personally experienced their credit card readers going down across the entire site. And I've read reports from other people that their credit card readers are going down, and that the only way you're going to activate a BP Pulse charger is by downloading their app and setting up an account. So the chargers still work, but they're basically shutting off their credit card readers. And if that is intentional or systematic, then that's a big negative in my opinion, because if you're not offering credit card payment options, I already have app fatigue. I'm not downloading a BP Pulse app. I'm not loading an app. I'm not setting up an account. Either you let me pay with credit card, or I'm just going to go to a different charging provider. And so so hopefully if BP Pulse or their representatives are listening, if that's an intentional, we're shutting off our credit card payment readers, stop it. So
I have downloaded the app because I want to see when that GigaHub goes live, but I second that. I will delete it from my phone as soon as I realize that the Logan GigaHub has gone live. It's gone. But yeah, I agree. It's although I'm not particularly a fan of card readers in general, just because of the pain point, I would completely agree they need to be on these things because they do help. You know, if there's poor connectivity, if the app is just a pile of flaming garbage, as so many of them are, shall recharge. There's all of these, you know, potential flaws in the app, and I'd love to have just an easy way to tap. So I completely agree with that. Walter, clues over your head notwithstanding, is there anybody else you'd like to talk about before you go on a full gushing rant about IONNA?
Yeah, so we're talking 2024 in the current context, and so I started the year off very heavily in EVgo's basket as an EVgo member, as a what is it, a Plus Max. I forgot the tier of membership, but I got the top tier of membership, and I was very happy. The pricing was very competitive. Anywhere I wanted to go, there was EVgo stations, and it didn't port over to Pilot Flying J, which was unfortunate. I'm still kind of waiting for the discounts for General Motors owners to be advertised for the Pilot Flying J stations, and I'm assuming towards the end of the year, perhaps in the fourth quarter earnings deck or something, they'll give some indication of what that is. But once the supercharger opened, I switched memberships to Tesla, and in the state of North Carolina, there's been multiple very prominent Tesla supercharger stations that are also open to non-Teslas. Specifically, there's near the Raleigh-Durham International Airport, there's one with a canopy, and I think it's 16 stalls. It might be 20. I have to go back and look and refresh my memory, but they're all V4 dispensers and really nice canopy, and they're attached to a Sheetz gas station. Now, this is starting to become increasingly important because what I'm finding is with Tesla supercharger stations, there's kind of a fine line between cool, everything's great, this is super nice, and oh my God, this is like a terrible nightmare, and what did I get myself into, sort of thing. And the distinction between that, I think, for instance, there's a Tesla supercharger station off Interstate 95 in Dillon, South Carolina, that was famously reviewed by Brandon Flash as at the time, the largest one on the East Coast, but it's on a plot of land that's just sandwiched between a couple of fast food restaurants close to the interstate exit. And what tends to happen when you put a lot of chargers sandwiched in between businesses that don't really have any, you know, they're not signing a lease deal with them, they're just kind of parked next to the restaurants. That many chargers off a major corridor, you're going to see the amount of people trooping through your store just to use the restroom all day, 7 days a week. Is every time you unlock your door to open up for business, there's going to be some Tesla supercharger customers coming in to use your restroom. That gets old really quick. And what tends to happen is business owners start putting up signs saying Tesla supercharger customers unwelcome or things like that. And it becomes palatable that you're not welcome in the adjoining businesses. So Tesla selects a site with amenities close by, but unless it's actually on the property of a convenience store or there's some kind of accommodation made, the situation can get kind of dicey. So I've also seen where Tesla puts in stations and they don't put in any garbage cans. For instance, there's a new 12-stall V4 station near my house adjoining to a Starbucks. And for some reason, they put in the pedestals for the garbage cans, but they didn't actually put in any garbage cans. Maybe they'll come later, but I have seen at other Tesla supercharger stations where there's pedestals for garbage cans, but there's no garbage cans. And again, the relentless flow of people through those sites, invariably there's going to be some trash left. Let's just say it's 2 items of trash per day, and that's being optimistic. And actually, it's going to be more, but let's just say 2, and no one picks it up. One day turns into 3, and 3 days turns into a week, and a couple of weeks, and before you know it, the place is a disaster. So with Tesla supercharger stations, as long as it's in a property that Tesla is paying some form of rent to the property owner, and the site is cared for instance, at Sheets, then it's great. I'd really enjoy them. 8 stalls at a Sheets, I could do that all day long. There's also a very large 60 stall one off Interstate 95. It's a beautiful site. It's got a canopy. It's got garbage cans that are maintained. It's got a water spigot. It's adjoined to a convenience store that's open 24/7, 365. Just really beautiful station. There's another one at Wilson, North Carolina that's cohabitated with Circle K. Again, beautiful station with an adjoining fast food restaurant and a convenience store. But then there's one that I reviewed, and I got a lot of Tesla fans calling me a Tesla hater because I reviewed the thing honestly, saying this is a bad station. How dare I? Apparently. My personal opinion is the Tesla supercharger network has tremendous potential, and right now I'm sticking with my membership. But over the past couple of weeks, I've definitely started to rethink that decision, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do long term. But right now, with the amount of stations going in, they definitely have the high ground.
That's an interesting kind of angle as well, because we really only have 3 memberships, I guess. Maybe someone can point to a 4th, but I'm thinking, Tesla brings their membership brings the price down to basically what Tesla owners pay, as far as I've seen, and the prices I've looked at superchargers.
It is.
So that's primary. Yeah,
it's
same deal.
$13 in order to get the Tesla prices.
Then Electrify America has had forever. It was $4 for a while, now $7 the Pass Plus, which just slices 25% off their otherwise fairly expensive pricing. And then who else am I missing? EVgo, which is quite a lot more complicated because you have time of use and reservations, charging, session fees, but they tend to be somewhere between 20 and 32 or 33%, I think, from the the most expensive plan, which is about that kind of, well, you had it, Walter, right? It's the same price as the Tesla plan.
Yeah. And very just kind of right. And as you say, it's 30, but some of those stations, when you show up to them, you'll pay 20 some odd cents per kilowatt hour if you get it during the sweet spot. And as a old guy, I wake up at ungodly o'clock, so I don't mind showing up at 7 o'clock in the morning to a charging station.
Yeah, and Steve, you're talking specifically about the accounts or memberships required in order to get a discount, right?
Yeah, some kind of plan where you're actually paying monthly in order to lower the price, because there's not that many doing it, but I do think it's something, I don't know if it's a good thing, but I do think it's something we're going to see more of as networks grow next year.
Well, and see, my greater concern with that is the ones that, because in California, technically, moving forward, you're supposed to have credit card readers, right? But there's a grace period for implementing that. And then outside of California, I think maybe NEVI requirements, but otherwise, you don't have to have any sort of method for actually activating. And so a lot of these memberships, even if you don't have a paid membership for a discount, you still have to have the membership and a payment associated, because otherwise you just can't even activate the charger. And that to me is maybe even the more egregious issue, is if you need an app with a payment card associated with it just to start the charger, that's already wrong. And with EVgo, I was just going to mention, I know it's complicated, but I'll try to keep this one simple. 2 things happen though, is one, their most basic membership, which is just an activation account, you can still end up with session activation fees. which is, again, egregious, right? You don't want to have to pay $1 just to start the charge. But then the other thing is, one of their memberships is deceptive because the amount that you pay is actually earmarked for charging each month. So as long as you charge the $6 or $7 a month, you're basically your membership is free because you're just using that to actually charge your vehicle. So it can be a little bit deceptive on their pricing.
Yeah, I mean, before it was a no-brainer to use the Pass Plus on Electrify America because it's just that was who you were going to use on a road trip. There really wasn't an option. But as you start to get, we talked about these places where there's 3, 4, 5 options. That may start to come down to, as well as what the amenities are like and where it's located, who's offering the right kind of pricing. But again, then you have the EVgo, the complications with stuff like EVgo and then EVgo Extend, where the most prominent travel network, the Pilot Flying J, it's completely different pricing animal. It's maybe crazy expensive compared to some of the cheaper EVgo discounted deals, and that may again change. Walter's pointed to the potential for discounted pricing or model based offers in future. That could start to come into play as well. But don't want to hang out on pricing too long. I want to run through the comments and check who we have talked about in terms of charging vendors. Just more emojis from Crazy Postman with Francis. I'm taking it that isn't in relation to the neighboring restaurants. That's his experience.
He's been scarred.
Network itself.
Poor guy.
We hope they translate more to the experience I had outside of Oklahoma, in Missouri, which was pretty decent actually. And their hardware they are actually using the same hardware as Electric Era. Like obviously it's not the same stack but the Signet 400 kilowatts, in terms of power reliability, hopefully that will stand them in good stead and move on from those sick emoji days. Leonard is not happy with how quiet they've been. That may be Francis, I would guess, being from your area. Still not even committed to next J3400. Yeah, I think they will have to pretty soon because they're so widespread across the NEVI award space with being the leaders. They'll have to start to move on that and get those stations, if not retrofitted, certainly the new ones in the ground with a dual mix of J3400 and CCS1. You'll Traveler, Michigan, very happy with Ready, who are actually very widespread now as well. They're winning a lot of, I noticed them first in Michigan when I did that trip in the Bolt to the Upper Peninsula back in 2020, I guess. And they were just starting to come out, really peppering some of the locations with on the Upper Peninsula, which is really poorly served in terms of non-Tesla fast charging. But they popped up everywhere, but then started to appear in my area. We've got some really impressive kind of hardware. I think they're using one of the European manufacturers, ADS Tech, which has like a battery buffer. That's the one that Porsche uses. So yeah, quite impressed with not just their coverage, but also their range of hardware that they seem to have gone with. They have some potential. Hope they continue to do it next year. Anthony from his neck of the woods echoes Eric. Electric Era, fantastic. Just expanded brand new Costco site by installing another charging unit and including a next J3400 handle, doubled the power to 200 kilowatts. Absolutely. And Costco is kind of an interesting one because they also just announced a bunch of sites and have a bunch open. Some in your neck of the woods, Eric, with Costco's, I guess, near, I don't know if it's near Sacramento at all, any of those?
Yeah, they're the two that I know of for sure are in Sacramento. And yeah, those are the massive, one of them's a 10 stall and another one's a 14 stall charging site.
Yeah, so there's interesting ways of going there, with the plucky young upstart, but also the aging kind of commercial side of Electrify America, just for the sheer amount of chargers they can put in the ground, I guess. Crazy Postman, a DC site in New Mexico that is just in a grass field. Yeah, some of these stranded assets make for pretty amusing memes, but hopefully nobody's navigating to them because it's going to be a little bit of a horticulture effort to get to the charger and then find it not working. Let's see, Yoldi Traveler again, up from Michigan. Francis, again, outside of Oklahoma, in Ohio, in Muskogee, well, Muskogee might be Oklahoma. Anyway, they're working for him like most wishes the credit card readers worked. Let's see. This may be the nub of the problem for Crazy Postman. Never found a Francis BTC HP unit that has the credit card reader working. And if you do look at some of those sites, they are this older BTC hardware. So there may be just this kind of old lagging indicator, as with Electrify America, who we do think has improved over recent times. They may just be suffering from the reputation of that crap old hardware decision.
Well, so can I just pause for a moment on the BTC power, because I've maintained that Electrify America has been the worst charging provider in terms of credit card reader reliability. Every other charging provider I've used that has credit card readers is highly reliable. So I don't think it's just their BTC power hardware connection. And it sounds like Francis maybe did something similar to Electrify America. But that BTC power issue, their screens die, even their new units. We're even seeing this with Electrify America. When Kyle at Out of Spec visited that 14 stall unit in Sacramento at the Costco, several of those BTC Power Gen 4 units already had their screens dead. And I mean, I made that as a punchline, as a joke in the video when I visited the site, and literally 2 weeks later, their screens were dead. So like there's definitely some issues with BTC Power, even their new hardware.
Yeah, I don't know that other than Electrify America, I don't know that I'm seeing them roundly used. Certainly in the Navy world, they're not. I don't think they've popped up at all. It's Delta with Pilot Flying J, a lot of ChargePoint with Loves, Signet is everywhere.
EVgo was a big user of BTC Power, and they've pretty much ceased. So
yeah, if I think of the one site that we have that's a really good EVgo location in Central Mass, there's not many of them. It's a disaster. It's a really good location for it. It's got a Panera Bread there. It's right on the intersection of I-90 and I-84. It kind of comes up from Connecticut. And that site is just a mess compared to I kind of count EVgo in quite a, good esteem at the moment because of the Delta and the 350 kilowatt stations and how they've worked with auto charge. But that particular site has always seemed like has a lot of potential, but it's just the hardware lets it down every time.
Is it BTC Power hardware?
BTC Power,
yeah.
So yeah, we may be stumbling across a trend there. The screens are on though, so if there's any silver lining to be drawn, that may be it. Let's see. Scott Owens points out, we're going to get to this in a future episode because it's so big that we kind of have to dedicate a full one to it, but plug and charge will start to bridge a lot of these gaps. And we talked about it a bit on Grid Connections yesterday, how this is a technology that kind of moves us past even better than gas stations, because you plug in, you go away, and everything is handled by the vehicle. But Walter.
Yeah, and it was Scott's BMW app that I was showing. He was kind enough to just give me permission to use that. So he's been seeing a lot of plug and charge activity coming through on the BMW. And I suspect that crew is a little bit more technically proficient and able to read a standard and turn it into a functional app more so than other OEM stack teams. So I think that's what might be going on at BMW USA, is they're ahead of the curve, giving a kind of a indication of what's to come here.
Comment section is continuing with suggested branding. We have for Francis the sick emoji, for Taco Bell charging locations, gas up while you charge up, and a masked up emoji. Could carry some political ramifications, but good suggestion.
Not one station, as far as I know. It was just a cartoon rendering. I never actually saw a station.
Brian brings us back to charging vendors instead of gas. Did Circle K stall out at the end of last year? I was excited that so many were about to open, but the one near me seemed installed, just got a transformer about 2 months ago. I've got some of the numbers, but Walter, what are you seeing from your neck of the woods?
Unfortunately, I think the team might have been axed. I know someone on LinkedIn who was working there, and he seemed to be saying his farewells. This was probably about 3 months ago, and since then, the Circle K charge website, which shows their coming soon sites, has scaled back the number of coming soon sites, axing probably 80% of them. And I suspect the ones that are still there were in advanced stages of construction. So it feels as though there was an executive swoop in order to halt the aggressive path that they were on and downsizing the teams that were doing it. That might be incorrect, but reading the tea leaves that I am, that seems to be what has been going on at Circle K, unfortunately.
I could have sworn I did look at the numbers. I should have brought them up, but they were still opening stations, right? It's not like it's completely stopped. They're just not at a great clip.
The ones that have opened have been like in construction for a long time, as Brian is suggesting. It was ones that were very far along. Like in my neck of the woods, there was a couple of stations that were FreeWire Pro units that had vandalism done to them. They were ripped out. And it's been empty stalls now for going on 6 months. No chargers getting brought back.
Okay, that would be a shame because they are, across the country, but also very reasonably priced. Those ABB Terras are only 180, but they do the job 99 times out of 100.
Yeah, and working in enterprises as I have, these kind of erratic decisions are not uncommon and very. More often than not, they get reversed. But all I could say is what I'm seeing right now is that there appears to have been an executive decision to pump the brakes and either wait and see or look for different hardware, or maybe they were gutting the team and they were rebuilding the team or outsourcing, who knows what. But right now there does not appear to be as significant advancement at Circle K as there used to be.
On to Florida, and the bright spot from Florida, given that they can't be bothered to spend any of the hundreds of millions of dollars in NEVI funds, FPL Evolution is filling some of those gaps. Built out at 30 cents per kilowatt hour, some of these locations, high on plug share at those areas. Scott hasn't used them, but that's a yet, because you have to assume that if they're building out rapidly and putting affordable pricing in, that's going to be the go-to down in Florida, as well as those nice Buc-ee's stations with the Mercedes-Benz high-power charging. Let's see, what else have we got? I think there are some other good things here, but I want to make sure we cover the main topics there and get onto some of the vendors. Let's see, we've done some most promising. What about some local love? Folks who are, we've talked about FPL Evolution, that helps a little bit. I can give some flowers, as somebody says, to Evolve New York for continuing to expand. They do have the benefit of kind of short-circuiting the NEVI process to just get money for sites that they already had in the bag. So between them and Electrify America, they have really cranked on and got some locations. But it remains for me the blueprint for how to build out a statewide network that is in, regardless of Electrify America's reputation and whatever they've been through. The team at Evolve New York has continued to just crank out these locations, have local experts who live and drive EVs in those regions, not just in New York State, but everywhere in New York State, the local towns, all these kind of places, fill in those gaps. So pretty soon, I think they will qualify for fully built out, having covered thousands of miles of New York's alternative fuel corridors. And I've been to some of these areas this week. It's super remote up there in the Adirondack Mountains. There's not a lot up there, but some of these locations are outstanding. They're really, really good places to charge up a vehicle, and they're bringing business to local communities who really, didn't have a whole lot to hang their hat on. So I love the intersection of local folks who drive EVs and just love the ability to travel their state, coming in and bringing the expertise to get high power charging in really remote parts of the state. Who else would like to take some local attention?
Yeah, so here in the Southeast, FPL Evolution, as you mentioned, is a pretty prominent active player in the absence of any NEVI activity in the state of Florida. They seem to be taking the bull by the horns and seeing a unique opportunity. And there's Duke Energy as well, which is a very large energy. I don't even know what to call them. They span multiple states, so they provide electricity throughout multiple states, which is rather unusual, but they've been able to pull it off. And they've been very aggressive with the build of DC fast charger stations throughout the Southeast as well. And I'm still seeing, which was really strange, there was a massive delay, but I'm still seeing VW Dieselgate fund stations suddenly starting to light up. For instance, I came home, got off the train, came home, ate dinner, and then I ran to the local Pilot Flying J because someone posted that the chargers were there. And I just wanted to see, what kind of chargers. There's supposed to be a 100 kilowatt city charger. I wanted to see if it was. Looks like it. I mean, it's all in the box, and it looks to be the 100 one. I didn't want to take a crowbar out and take it out of the box. That seemed a little bit presumptuous. But anyway, that site is very likely being funded with VW Dieselgate funds. And then there's another site that I have seen, and that was very slow in coming. Holy smokes, I don't know why it took 2 years in order to disperse the funds. But the state of North Carolina does seem to be going through the process of, so VW Dieselgate is still a thing apparently. And obviously the Electrify America funds by and large came from that. And we're still being dispersed as of this year. So we can't count out the fact that Electrify America builds have been by and large through the Dieselgate fund process, but also the state builds as well. So the state of North Carolina has been a very big recipient of those. There were, I think, 5 Electrify America stations that went in 2024 in the state of North Carolina, 2 of which were in very remote areas, Wilmington, North Carolina, and New Bern, North Carolina. And then, as I said, the ones that are coming through Pilot Flying J through Dieselgate funding, which was Kenly, New Haw, North Carolina, and here in Kannapolis, North Carolina. All of those are Dieselgate funded.
Thanks for the color. Eric, what's happening in your neck of the woods?
So, I already kind of commented on a lot of the locals with the ChargeNet, the EV Range, Electric Era. So I'm going to surprise you with my local love is actually EVgo. Believe it or not. I mean, I know that they're a national player now and everything else, but I literally just thought about this as I was talking. With the addition of the Pilot Flying J and Weed, EVgo is now one of the few charging providers that you can literally drive the state end to end using only them to support your travel needs. Between, you're going to be stuck on a couple of slower 50 kilowatt chargers here or there. But for the most part, it's 350 kilowatt GM Energy funded, whether they're through Pilot Flying J or independently through that other metropolitan program that GM worked with EVgo on. They've got the state mostly covered at this point. And, I still have to do that EVgo speed run where I try to see how many different 350 kilowatt charging stations I can visit in a single day. And my guess is that number is far higher than people realize it is. So they've been putting in a lot of work, especially in northern, central, and I think even down into Southern California. I'm seeing a lot more stuff going in. So
awesome. No, it's good. The EVgo has a bunch of different bases covered, and I think the Pilot piece was big for building out the travel side, because obviously they were previously very metro clustered, but that has helped in California because you have so many metro areas that kind of, once you cluster out, you start to get that travel network just by virtue of them being in every city. But it sounds like they've also kind of hit travel routes as well, and you have all of that covered. But it does give us a segue to one we haven't really mentioned. So under the radar, ChargePoint has a slightly different model, but they have got this. Usually we associate GM's charging tie-ups with EVgo, but there's one in the news this week with ChargePoint and GM collaborating on up to 500 fast chargers. Walter, you brought this one to my attention. It may be also on Eric's kind of thoughts as well because of the GM connection. What are you thinking about that as a kind of, moving into a slightly different partner, and obviously a lot of roots with EVgo, but maybe hedging some bets there?
I was looking for any indication of what they might have been talking about, and it was very vague in the press release. But one thing they did release with it was a picture of Onion convenience store, which obviously doesn't exist. But it was some kind of gas station that they were indicating that they were going to be partnering with. It was obviously obfuscated to be generic, but what I believe they're suggesting is that they're going to be building at existing gas stations ChargePoint hardware, similar to what Love's is doing. Because when you saw the picture, there was island charging for pull-through, and there was also stalls up against the side of the building for pull-in, which was pretty well thought out. So I think that is going to be what we actually end up seeing when you start seeing some of these stations show up. And I would have to guess the usual suspects for large regional convenience stores are going to be leveraged to put these stations in. And I'm not sure, because ChargePoint doesn't do site selection. I don't really know who's going to be driving the location selection and the actual engineering, if they'll farm that out to Owl after they sign some kind of partnership deals with select convenience store operators or what. But I'm pretty sure, and I don't think it's going to be Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's kind of seems to be spoken for. But I'm pretty sure that's what we're looking at, is General Motors is going to be installing ChargePoint Express Plus at select convenience store chains throughout the United States through 2024. And they say they're all going to be open by this time next year. So the plan is obviously well developed and all the way to the point of probably the hardware is already purchased and it just needs to be engineered, installed, and likely further announcements will be forthcoming in Q1.
Yeah.
The stuff augurs. Sorry, go ahead, Eric. I want to hear your piece on it as well.
Well, yeah, because the press release, the only real detail that we got, other than it being ChargePoint Express Plus hardware, was that it was going to be 500 units, right? So 1,000 stalls, and then just if we assume that they're putting between 2 and 4 units per location, that kind of gives you an indication of how many sites we can expect. And to Walter's point, yeah, ChargePoint sells the hardware and they sell the back-end connectivity and through that subscription service, and then they sell basically upkeep plans, right? Maintenance plans. So with GM doing this is either GM planning to actually own their own hardware and equipment, or working through someone kind of like what they've done with Pilot Flying J and the EVgo Extend program, which is basically EVgo's equivalent to what ChargePoint offers as their base business model. So yeah, this is kind of an interesting, it's really interesting to me because to Walter's point, I don't know who or where these are going in, but I could also see the possibility that they could be going in at Pilot Flying J's to supplement the deltas, in the sense that we already seen complaints of, oh, you only have 4 stalls at a Pilot Flying J. Well, what if we put in an extra set of chargers over at a bank somewhere, and this time they're ChargePoint, not a Delta. But then the other big thing that I wanted to note is people don't give, I think, the 200 kilowatt hour GM Ultium, which they no longer use, EVs, enough credit, because based on what we've seen from their charging profiles, a 350 kilowatt charger isn't fast enough to max them out. And so these ChargePoint Express units specifically are 500 kilowatt chargers, which should actually provide the maximum charging rate for these larger pack GM EVs. So there's still a lot to unpack, but as we said, the press release is kind of short on details. So TBD.
Yeah, but I don't think we're going to have to wait very long, judging from what they were saying. If they're talking about being wrapped up by Christmas 2025, pretty soon this story is going to be told.
It's I mean, there's a lot to be said on ChargePoint because they have so many high-profile clients there. With obviously starting up with Mercedes-Benz, high-powered charging network, but them being in friends with Alpatronic now, but also Walmart, big one that's just kind of sat there, which I want to make sure I get to because we have comments from Arkansas as well. But sorry, go ahead, Eric.
I was going to say the one last thing I'll say about the ChargePoint Express Plus units is they take about a third of the time to activate as the typical Delta 350 kilowatt. So if that's a sticking point for customers too, you're getting close to Tesla supercharger activation times on a 500 kilowatt charger. So
that's been a strong point of ChargePoint, at least from my experience, for a long time. Though with CPE 250s were always pretty quick to fire up as well. Let's see. So Walmart, which as far as I know is still with ChargePoint Express Plus units. Arkansas Traveler says planning for Walmart is very slow, but Metroplex and Phoenix remain targeted for the network. Feels they're observing new titans to watch and plan the rollout that comes after it, and using CPE plus the ChargePoint Express without CP software is a pivot. Indeed, thank you for that color, because they kind of roll under the radar a little bit as well, despite the absolutely enormous potential there. Walter, anything you want to add to that before we shift on?
Yes, so there might be some indication that the Walmart rollout is being stonewalled internally, and I don't think that's the case. My personal opinion is the original source that was citing October for the Metroplex stations to be starting construction, and they were supposed to be finished by the end of the year or spring, if I remember correctly, was written by a Fort Worth Star intern. So it is conceivable that what was conveyed to her was somehow not accurately written, but the dates in that article were October, and I believe it was the end of the year. I still think it's occurring, and I think my personal opinion, once we start shifting gears into what's going to be coming in 2025, I think Walmart could very easily smoke everyone else. They're ferocious. Once they turn their sights on something, they're like honey badger. They just don't stop, and it's coming. And before you know it, they've got 200 stations, 200 Walmarts lit, each one of them with 4 or 6 stalls, whatever. And they just keep going and going and going, and they'll just lap everyone in a very short amount of time. So I don't have any concern that Walmart is not occurring or they're moving too slowly. I have always expected that once it happens, it will be unmistakable.
I do have one question though. What's a honey badger?
Don't know what a honey badger is? Oh, okay. It goes back to a very famous YouTube video where someone was talking about it's an animal, I think, in Africa, and it don't care. It'll just keep going, and it'll rip apart an anthill that is getting bit on, and it will eat snakes. It'll do whatever. It just doesn't stop.
Tasmanian devil for the worldwide.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Honey badger don't give a
don't give a shit.
All right. I appreciate the color. Thank you.
You watch you watch the YouTube honey badger, and you'll see the honey badger video.
I have another video to add to the list. Thank you.
It's very short.
We have some more local love. I want to make sure I get to these because these will go overlooked too easily. Arkansas Traveler calls out Franklin Charging in Little Rock as the original rechargery. Seems like it was a bit of a difficult time with the FreeWire bankruptcy, insolvency. I don't know what they're calling it, but they haven't resurfaced yet, as Tritium have. But yeah, that's seemed like a really good little space there. It's obviously going to be tough to expand much beyond that, but it's good to see local providers really starting to serve the community and get national attention, as I know they've had visits from out of spec and a bunch of EV folks who travel through the region. So yeah, thank you for calling them out. Appreciate that. Paul in Bakersfield has the Caltrans, which Eric can speak to, at highway rest stops, lifesavers in remote areas on US 395, east side of Sierra Nevada. Seems like that may be a prickly point for you.
Yeah, so the Caltrans chargers, I love that they tried. I love that they tried more BTC power hardware. But what I found is half the time the chargers work, and then the other half the time the rest area is closed. So
okay, but otherwise,
but they're free.
They are free, and free never causes any problems, as we know. Awesome. Well, it's still local, so that counts. And Vlad has northern lower peninsula of Michigan. I'm trying to picture it in my my travels. Expressway easy marts of solid charge point CCS chargers with affordable rates, perhaps not top shelf charging power and rates, but convenient locations. Yeah, that can be all you need sometimes. We've talked about Circle K's expansion, and even if it has stalled out, they put in the right kind of reliable hardware. In a lot of places I crossed the country and found them pretty much every 1,000 miles or so there'd be an option for Circle K. So same with Michigan and those expressway easy marts. And I think that may be something we'll add to the list in Wisconsin next year with Quick Trip and their Quick Charge brand. That seems to be something that's building very quickly. We may want to call them out for some local attention next year. And Leonard is excited to see the Oklahoma Navy builds, wants to see Universal Love's coverage. Yeah, we haven't talked much about Love's because they haven't actually done much this year, but they do have 2 sites open, I believe, one in Pennsylvania, one in New York. And
they have older model sites that predate this build out plan in California. I think probably about half a dozen last time I checked.
I almost don't give them. I feel like it's not really part of the. No, it's there at Love's. There's one in Binghamton. There's in New York. There's a Electrify America. I just consider it kind of a they just happen to say yes, you can have some parking spaces. I think once they start to get serious, there's the potential to really build a kind of pilot flying J.
The 2 have been retrofitted with canopies. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but so both sites that are open now have canopies.
Good, okay.
The first one in New York originally did not, but then they went back in and the canopy ferries showed up and poof.
I wonder if it had anything to do with them getting an absolute walloping from a lake effect snowstorm like the week after they opened.
Yeah.
It may have helped out. So yeah, we actually do need a canopy in this place. And then yes, we should move on to it. We don't want to this actually bridges us nicely to 2024 moving into 25 because they will straddle the year here. IONNA behind Walter there, big day tomorrow. Well, let's just go around quickly. I mean, obviously we're excited to see what they do. There's the partnership with Sheets, which I think Tyler mentioned further up that I have some views on. But Walter, you may as well start because you'll be there in less than 24 hours.
Glad to. And if anyone has any questions they want me to ask, feel free to post in the comments and I'll try to carry them along. I've got 3 questions so far, which is the Canada question. What are they going to be doing in Canada and when would they get started? The plug-in charge, and one question for me, do they really think they can open 2 stations per day for 5 years straight? I have a hard time believing that. They seem to think that is the case, but I'd like to hear it for the record. So the opening, I think, is going to, this is actually not an opening. This is a Cars and Coffee where we're allowed to test and provide feedback. I actually got the email from the marketing communications director just this afternoon where, yes, we're there in order to have fun and take lots of pictures, and they were encouraging us to do so. But we're also there to provide feedback to burn in their, I think they're calling it a pre-beta site. So they want the feedback. They actually do listen to what people say. I went to an event that was NDA'd, but it was clear that they were paying attention to what I was saying as far as the feedback goes. But this one isn't going to be NDA'd, and we'll be able to share our views on what they have contrived as the best in class charging station and provide the feedback to them, whether or not we agree with them or not. So will be exciting. The opening will be, from what I understand, on the 27th of December. And by all accounts, they're going to be also opening 3 additional stations at the same time. And if I understand correctly, those were going to have canopies as well. And I don't know if every location will have canopies, but I think this first batch all will. So that's something to give them a bit of a distinction, plus to get their name and branding icons out there. Then after that, it's really anyone's guess what to expect out of this team. They have talked about being iterative in their improvements, allowing themselves to learn and continually getting stronger. And I think that is wise to say that we don't have it all figured out, but we will be figuring it out as time goes on. And every station we open, we're going to be getting stronger and stronger and improving our product for our customers. So kudos to them. It's going to be terrific to watch. And IONNA is likely going to be spearheading the start of 2025, but there's so many others out there. My head's spinning just thinking about all the different builds that are going to be going on. So eventually we'll get to that, but let's just let's stay focused a little bit here on IONNA, and I'll pass it back to you guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know a couple of questions that I've already seen people mentioning with IONNA, Walter, is just in terms of pricing, right? Because we've seen so much off the wall pricing for DC charging. And I have 2 minds to this, because I think people don't give enough credit to the fact that the 2 biggest charging providers up to this point are highly subsidized in the form of Tesla, where their superchargers are essentially a marketing wing for them to sell their vehicles, and with Electrify America, which was quite literally subsidized as part of a judgment. So we never really got a very good answer as to what a competitive pricing model would be. So I'd be curious if that's what IONNA is basically aiming for, is a commodity level competitive pricing model. And then the other thing too would just be what their business model is, or their business strategy is, because if we know how they're looking to recoup their losses or pay for their stations, that would be, I mean, do they think they're going to do it by selling snacks or, lease agreements with local businesses? So those would be the kind of things I'd be curious for you to find out while you're there. But
I have the same thought as you, and I have a difficult time coming up with framing a question of how are you going to make money. But I guess I could just ask it like that.
What's your business model? What's your ROI? Yeah.
Step back. Do you need to make money? Because maybe they are. There's 8 automakers. They benefit from moving to EVs, except Toyota perhaps, but they've always been a strange animal. But they all have deep pockets. They know that charging needs to work, and they don't want to hand everybody to Tesla, basically, right? So they
Yeah, I don't think they need money in order to do the builds, but in order to keep a station running for 10 years, you definitely need to be in the
demand charges,
Demand charge,
upkeep,
Yeah, they're not going to be a black hole in the kind of the way Electrify America is, handed out free charging like it's candy. But they are going to have to, they'll have some leeway, I think is the point. They have deep pockets and heavy funding, so if they do start to see that the pricing isn't quite working, or that they are spending a lot of money on these places that don't really pay back that quickly, they'll have some runway to adjust. Whereas others, as we've seen, really they can build out impressive client lists and locations, BP Pulse, lots of gas stations, but FreeWire couldn't make that work no matter what, despite a bunch of different business models. And you do need deep pockets to keep this charging infrastructure game running. What else? Well, let's move it wider to everybody as well. If you're in the comments there, we'll round this 90 minutes out with hopes and predictions for infrastructure to start with, but also EVs in 2025. We haven't focused much on models this time out, but we can talk about the things that we do want to see next year, maybe things that we're worried about. Let's see, Walter. No, Eric, you can go first too.
Oh, well, I was just going to mention too, there's a comment that I do think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Rivian Adventure Network. Yeah, that one was a bit earlier. I mean, I will say though that I'm still waiting, because I think for me my biggest disappointment is that, and there was one even earlier than that too. Yeah. My biggest disappointment with their announcement was that they weren't retroactively making their charging sites open, which is the ones that got me excited about being able to access the Rivian network were some of their original sites that they put in. So now it's like, okay, well, moving forward, a select version of our outpost sites are going to be open to all EVs. And that means, like, right now, it's literally only Joshua Tree in California. So the only Rivian site that's open to me is 600 miles away. Even their Groveland one, the one on the way to Yosemite, isn't retroactively open, at least not according to their site. So that's kind of I'm chilled on them until they can prove to me that they actually are planning to open their existing sites to non-Rivian EVs, and at which point I'll be a little bit more excited again.
Yeah, I mean, for context, they have just before they opened Joshua Tree, I think it was 91 locations. So they're quite widespread. It's about half the country. This site behind me is one of them. That's the nearest one to me. That's New York, the one they opened this week. And that's great. It's a good experience, and that video is coming up this weekend, I think. But on the way there are 2 or 3 that would have been useful to charge at, that I would have liked to have, tried just as a comparison, that were the first generation, that were in that first 90 sites, that, some of them are only at malls and nothing that entertaining, but they're pieces in the puzzle that would have been potentially a moneymaker for Rivian, especially as you see, they're very rarely, these aren't busy. There's not a lot of Rivians out there using them, maybe in summer a little bit more, but they have the pull-through stalls, they have the power, even if it's not quite as easy to access with the shorter cables. They're not bad sites, and I was definitely, it just cooled me in the same way. I think I was looking forward to kind of visiting a bunch of different ones and seeing how they open up certain areas, and now you've got 4 sites that we can talk about. I'm sure there are more coming, and that's going to be the future of their build out, these taller Gen 1.5 cabinets and dispensers. But it's kind of a, it feels like a letdown when you look at the network that's nationwide and then say, oh, well, I can go to 4 stations, and as you say, it's 600 miles away. It's it's too much.
They could have mentioned that in the earlier press releases.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there may be plans here. Maybe if it all turns around in the next couple of months, then we can eat crow. But it's one of those things that everybody talks about for the entire year, because they set that kind of expectation of we'll be opening to Rivian EVs by the end of the year, and then it kind of lands like the outpost is cool, but other than that, there's just not a lot going on there. Okay, thank you for calling that one out, because I would have missed it otherwise. What else have we got? Brian in Minnesota for 2025, wishing for continued uptime improvements for chargers so that all new EV drivers have positive charging experiences, and peace on earth if you can swing it. Absolutely, but definitely uptime first and foremost.
Yeah, speaking of which, and coming from Brian's perspective as a Tesla owner, the supercharger network hasn't really seen competition like it's now feeling. And they've recently done a press release where actually it wasn't a press release, it was a post on X, but nowadays that accounts to a press release, indicating that they were going to be accommodating longer cables and retrofitting their stalls with more convenience for non-Tesla owners. And they've also talked about the big Oasis site in California. There is a similar size site in Florida that should be coming online soon. So the V4 dispensers, the V4 cabinets, Tesla Supercharger is definitely starting to up their game and reinvent themselves as a public CPO instead of a private CPO. And looking ahead into 2024, I definitely think that is nothing but good for all EV drivers as we start to standardize on J3400. So them and, this just came in Plugshare. I don't know if we could see that. No, we can't see that. Anyway, this is a Shell recharge station in Houston that's greenfielded as a one of the gigahubs outside of Houston. It is now under construction. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like 6 pedestals going in, and so we've got CPOs showing up literally all over the place. And unlike Tesla blazing a trail, everyone's now coming down the trail, and starting to put in competitive offerings that didn't exist previous, and that has nothing but a positive effect for us as EV drivers.
Yeah. Now, maybe I missed this. Did Tesla have to abandon one of their NEVI grants? I thought.
Yeah, in Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, yeah, they went to EVgo as second place.
Yeah,
but it wasn't clear. They didn't say. They just said they didn't say anything. The DOT, I think, said they couldn't meet. They failed to meet the requirements, or would not meet the requirements.
Okay.
Don't know if that was power levels, card readers, all the things that people have moaned about a little bit, but that was the case. Okay, what else? So Leonard, yeah, I just brought that up quickly. To Walter's point, the whole mega V4 retrofit will be epic, especially if all V4 sites get V3 sites get the V4 stalls and cabinets.
Yeah, I don't know about all, but definitely that seemed to be what they were indicating, that they were going to be replacing 3 with 4s to a large extent.
What else have we got? There was a question for Walter to ask. Andy would like to know how IONNA will select sites, both urban and rural corridors. So we have some examples of those already, but maybe they can add some context.
Very well.
And future thoughts. And yeah, so beyond that, I guess the stuff that we just will have to get into future live streams on Plug and Charge we mentioned already. J3400, I know Eric is less obsessed with that than most of the EV universe, but it's still one of those things that's going to be coming, and I think we start to see it in some of these sites now. As I've mentioned in the past, Texas sites are all going to have both dual CCS1 and J3400. The standardization process is getting very close to finishing up. And
that was another detail in that GM ChargePoint press release. All 500 of those CPE are going to be the Omniport chargers. So
right. So it's just going to be more and more. I mean, when you see these, any station that is launched, if you follow it on Twitter, will now be YCCS1 or why no next, and I think you're going to start to see that. It's just that 12 to 18 month lag time. That's just what happens, how they build. Stuff was already in the pipeline, it's been built, and it comes, after the news of the transition. So now we will start to see the news that was almost 18 months ago, or probably was, start to come through in the actual, ground construction and things that we're starting to charge at. So that's going to start happening. The Tesla retrofits are a big one. I don't know what else. I'm kind of starting to blank, and we are running out of time here. So if you all want to kind of go around and just say maybe one thing that you hope for electric vehicles in general next year, including the cat, then we can go.
I guess I'll go first. I'd like to see IONNA actually. I've seen so many press releases that actually haven't come to fruition. I'd like to see IONNA actually do what they say they're going to do with the 30,000 chargers, and we'll know by this time next year if they are ramping up to a degree where it actually seems feasible that they'll hit the mark or not. But there's a lot of skepticism that that claim is actually a viable claim. But if I could ask for one thing for 2025, I'd like to actually see IONNA actually happen.
Yeah. I would say I would like to make sure that the EV tax credit and point of sale credit for both new and used EVs is preserved. So that's the hope for 2025.
And I would like to see more of a shift to level 2 destination charging. We're probably as guilty of this as anyone else, but I think that's where a lot of the adoption is really going to be moved, at least for those of us on the coasts and in the cities in the middle. I think there's a big vast swathe of people who just kind of look at EV ownership as too troublesome because they can't get that benefit of charging at home. And for all the road trips we love to do and for all the big money that's spent on these anything, we need to focus on people who just couldn't have a place to park and charge. That's where the car spends most of its life. And I would love to see the It's Electrics, the Pando Electrics, all the folks we've talked to this year, and a bunch of other smart solutions really start to hit those cities and homes that don't have home charging. And with that, if there are any hopes here in the comments, I will read them out, but I don't think we do. So yeah, here we go. This is a good one to finish it up. Leonard, the best charger after all is the one in your garage or in your driveway or in your parking spot at the apartment complex or even at your workplace. Anywhere you park that thing for 6, 8, 10 hours, depending on how hard you work or how long you stay at work. All that stuff. We hope to see more of that next year. So with that, it's been a great year. We appreciate everyone who joins in week after week and bring us your insights, questions, ideas. The list is long for what we want to talk about and the suggestions I've had for all of the conversations that we hopefully will have next year. But I wish everybody happy holidays, a happy Christmas and New Year, and Walter a happy trip to Apex. That's like Christmas come early for him. And yeah, thank you both for your contributions this year. I think we've made a bit of a difference, and I hope to continue it going next year. Let you guys say your happy holidays as well, if you'd like to.
Yeah, happy holidays, and you'll be happy to know on my latest trip I did pick up a tree, Steve.
Yes. All right, that's my Christmas watching sorted. Thank you. All right. And yeah, safe travels tomorrow, Walter. Thank you, everybody. Back to you and yours. And for once, one more time this year, happy holidays, nerds. Cheers.